Hey everybody, Rosematter here. Welcome to part 2 of my Higurashi When They Cry Matsuribayashi Let's Play. In the last episode, we took a peek into Takano's very tragic childhood and backstory and how she became the person that she is. So we kind of saw like a peek into her rise to the top of this, secret society. And it's quite interesting. I mean, I have a little bit of sympathy for her, but I still don't feel like it absolves her of, what she ended up doing in the end. But we're going to get more into this. It definitely seems like this is Takano's, chapter. But I'm wondering how long we're going to be getting her backstory before we kind of jump into the present time. That's what I'm most excited to see, is I want to see how the gang hopefully are able to, use the past experiences and do everything right this time to try and stop her. So anyway, we're going to get back into it and see what happens next.
ご紹介します。高野さんさです。さんさ、こちらは入江京介先生です。
Alright, so this is going to be the introduction to Eerie and then eventually Tomotake, and I guess seeing how the relationships between her and him kind of started.
どうも、入江と申します。
Eerie seemed extremely nervous at our first meeting. He probably thought I was in charge of some suspicious organization.
萎縮しなくて結構ですわ。高野とお呼びください。
恐縮です。この度はお引き立ていただき深く感謝いたします。
And poor Eerie, just wanting to do good and having no idea what he's being dragged into.
どうぞおかけになってください。
A model lower middle class citizen was a good way to describe Kyosuke Eerie's demeanor. One could also say he was the stereotypical type of person to get conveniently discarded after those crafty elders used their seniority to constantly pick on him. He certainly doesn't seem as cunning as I am. But that doesn't mean he isn't ambitious. Like me, he's a young person who dreams of accomplishing something great and leaving his name upon generations to come. While he acts humble in person like this, his articles were actually progressive as well as aggressive. The gap between the two was quite intense.
平見沢症候群の資料を読ませていただきました。
いかがでしたか？
非常に驚くことばかりでした。確かに今日の医学の暗部に踏み込みかねない内容ではありますが、未だ世界で誰も解明していない神秘という点で知的興奮を抑えきれません。
Hearing that made me chuckle. Eerie is more than interested in Hinamizawa syndrome, which is good enough for me. She'd been through the ringer with far too many people to reach this day, so her honed intuition could tell. She would get along well with this man. Even if he isn't useful to me, he won't cause any problems. For both me and my sponsor, he's the best person possible for the job.
私こそ驚いております。入江先生ほどの博識かつ経験豊富な方が責任ある地位も仕事も与えられず、医局の片隅で飼い殺されているなど、これは医学界の重大な損失と言わざるを得ませんわ。
Eerie laughed. He probably thought I didn't know, but I had received detailed documents on him. So I knew why he was exiled from the limelight despite his rare talent and achievements. Ooh, we're going to get more into Eerie's background. He displayed extraordinary skill working under a neurosurgery expert, and everyone expected a bright future from him. But he was kicked out due to an ethical controversy. Eerie's pet theory was that the antisocial behavior of individuals could be explained by brain disorders. He believed that no one in this world was born a villain, and they were all just poor patients in need of treatment. He proposed that they were all proper and normal when born, yet as they matured, psychogenesis and various exogenous factors caused brain disorders that made them into villains. Therefore, what those evil people needed isn't punishment, it's treatment, and if their diseases are treated, they will become good citizens again. That manner of thinking actually fell in line with the Confucian belief of innate human goodness. According to this theory, humans are born with the capacity for altruism toward their kind, and it is only afterward that they learn and acquire cruelty. Eerie believed that acquisition was the result of brain disorders. The human brain creates human thoughts. Therefore, if one becomes emotionally ill, that means their brain is ill. So if their brain gets treatment, they will recover emotionally too. That field was called psychosurgery. It's fallen out of practice in the current Heisei era, but the surgical techniques were applauded until mid-Showa, especially since it produced spectacular results on a chronic mental patient that was said to be incurable. The man who invented it even won a Nobel Prize. That was how revolutionary it was. Humans think, that's why they become ill. Everyone knows that's why those who overthink matters are prone to mental illness. When the organ that thinks and debates grows ill, humans deviate from social behavior. That part is called the frontal lobe. Put simply, psychosurgery is surgery performed to operate on the frontal lobe. This kind of surgery doesn't require removing the whole cranium. A small hole is drilled through the cranium, and a special scalpel is inserted down to cut it. It's not a major surgery, just a technique for quickly operating on the precious frontal lobe. We're not talking about lobotomies, though, right? Like, I actually just listened to a podcast recently about lobotomies, and I believe they worked on the frontal lobe because that is the, that's the epicenter for, our thinking and things like that. Indeed, it was revolutionary in its simplicity, because the thing is, like, when people get lobotomies, it's like, yeah, they tend to calm down for the most part, but they basically lose who they are as people. Like, they lose their personality. They just become essentially zombies. All the severely ill mental patients miraculously recovered, so the technique spread around the world quickly. Those with obstinate and chronic mental illnesses, the severely ill trapped in deep, inescapable depression, all those could be saved by this technique. Throughout history, humans have come up with many different religions and magic tricks to heal emotional injuries. So needless to say, the idea of being able to treat them with a surgical technique was truly revolutionary. Eerie admitted psychosurgery and pushed forward in the field of surgical techniques to treat human souls. However, from the modern human rights standpoint, severing a portion of the brain simply because someone is emotionally disturbed is absolutely out of the question. People gradually started to think differently and said that psychosurgery was inhumane. It does sound like they're talking about lobotomies. Like they're calling it psychosurgery, but that's what it's sounding like. The frontal lobe controls how people think, but it is also the part that makes humans act human. Exactly, yes. There's quite a few cases where that cut caused drastic, irreversible changes in the patient. A baseless happiness born from lack of thought. It's like the epitome of, like, ignorance is bliss, because they can't really think for themselves, so it's just like, yeah, they seem like they're happy, but they're not really them. A change in personality, a loss of interest in everything, major mood swings due to a lack of control over one's emotions. Some even lost part of their memories. Of course, some didn't even survive the surgery. By the mid-1960s, use of psychosurgery declined. Also, due to the development of psychotropic medicine, the surgery was hardly performed anymore anyway. I've shouted out this podcast plenty of times, I believe, before, but if you guys are interested, last podcast on the left, they did a 2-part series on lobotomies, and it was very interesting. So if you are interested in this kind of thing, check it out. Yet, some people still believe in the idea and continue to perform the surgery and gather clinical data. They wanted people to recognize the value of the technique once again. Some of these surgeries were performed without consent. One theory is that in Japan alone, there were thousands of people who woke up from general anesthesia, only to find part of their brain had been removed. Today, to perform such a surgery without a patient's consent is considered totally unethical, but it was different at the time. For one thing, the idea that doctors require prior patient consent was proliferated in the modern Heisei era. Therefore, people at the time didn't think it was that big of an issue. It was only later that people started to argue that it was inhumane. Finally, a decision was reached and the curtain closed with the rejection of psychosurgery. Later, the Japanese Society of Psychology and Neurology passed their resolution to end psychosurgery. After that, psychosurgery was banned throughout Japan and made a forbidden subject of Japanese medicine. Eerie was the leading person in the field of psychosurgery. He continued to advocate its effectiveness and results. Therefore, he was treated as a war criminal who practiced inhumane medicine and was exiled from the public eye. However, that doesn't mean he changed his beliefs. He still believes immoral behavior is caused by brain disorders, and the secret of treating them is in fact hidden in the brain. So Eerie, you had me in the first part. I was like, okay, I agree with you to some aspect. I mean, yes. In a very layman sense, a lot of times, yes, mental disorders are caused by the brain, obviously. But I am so not down for the idea of lobotomies. I do not agree with that. So the existence of Hinamizawa syndrome, caused by parasites living in the brain that control human emotions, actually affirms his theory.
私ごときでこの度の話、ぜひ引き受けさせていただきたいと思います。
Of course. Given Eerie's history, he would never turn down this offer. Despite his mild-mannered appearance, Eerie was possessed by a mighty ambition. There was no way he didn't desire a chance to complete research that would prove himself to the medical society that ostracized him. I'm handing him that chance on a silver platter.
ありがとうございます。入江先生ならば当方もあなたのような専門家を迎えられとても助かります。
しかし私などが所長でいいのでしょうか。それは高野さんがやられた方がよろしいでしょう。私は単なる医者に過ぎません。人の上に立ったことなど。
ご安心ください。それにつきましては私も全面的にサポートいたします。トップは制服ではなく背広からというのが上の希望でもあります。お気に召しませんか？入江所長という呼び名は。
いえいえ。いやしかし
Eerie laughed to hide his embarrassment.
現在ひなみ沢に研究施設を建設中です。表向きは診療所ということになっています。入江先生にご快諾をいただけましたので入江診療所という名前にいたしましょう。
一国一城の主とはもったいない話です。
あと身分を陸自で預かることになりますので先生の席は陸自の医官という扱いになります。私の上司ですので二佐の階級になりますわね。入江二佐という呼び名はいかがでしょ
う。私は軍人じゃありません。二佐という呼び名は遠慮させていただきたいものです。所長だって恐れ多いくらいです。いやいや。
He's getting a chance to research brain parasites, plus being given the title of director of a new clinic as camouflage. Plus, it comes with staff and funding. He'll even have support from the Defense Agency and Ministry of Health and Welfare, as well as a research lab with state-of-the-art equipment. No wonder he's laughing so excitedly. However, there are some risks too. Since he'll be involved with the secret research, he has an obligation to keep it a secret. Also, he's going to an area plagued by a mysterious and bizarre disease. There's no guarantee he won't contract it himself. But Eerie is too young to even think about those things. Aware of all the risks, he quickly signed the contract with the ambition to have people recognize his talent once again. Also, I'm so sorry if you can hear banging in the background. It sounds like they're working on the apartment nearby. They're doing renovations, so I'm sorry about that. When I saw him sign the contract, I finally relaxed. I knew he would agree to join us, but at the same time I was afraid of the chance that he'd refuse. Selecting a director proved more difficult than expected, and the only candidate Takano paired well with was Eerie. So if Eerie refused to take the position, then frankly she'd be placed in an even worse situation. Now that Eerie has agreed to take the position, research on Hinamizawa syndrome can finally begin. The research center, or rather the clinic, will be completed next spring. The Ministry of Health and Welfare and the Defense Agency will send the best equipment and staff, plus an abundant supply of funds. And finally, our research will begin in earnest. Everything is going well. Of course it is. I've put so much effort into making sure things went smoothly up to this point.
以上です。就任おめでとうございます。入江三佐、宣誓書へのサインを終わりました。
ありがとう。これからよろしくお願いいたしますわ。入江所長。
こちらこそよろしくお願いします。仲良くやりましょう。私も全身全霊をかけて頑張ります。
こちらこそお互い最善を尽くしましょう。
Now the position of director has been filled. Everything is set.
それはよかったよかった。おめでとう、高野さん。高野三佐でしたかな？
これもすべて先生方のお力添えがあったからこそです。高野MIYO、皆様に心より感謝させていただきます。
まあまあ、高野さんに本当の意味でおめでとうが言えるのは研究が成功に終わった時ですな。ようやく入り口にたどり着いたに過ぎませんよ。
おっしゃる通りです。寝る間を惜しんで研究に身を投じていく覚悟です。
高野先生が成し遂げられなかったさらにその先へ至られることを私ども一度楽しみにいたしておりますぞ。
まあ先生、今日はそういう堅苦しい話は抜きにしましょう。今日は高野さんのこれからと入江機関の設立を祝って乾杯と参りましょう。
乾杯の前にご挨拶申し上げます。厚生省の永田と申します。どうぞよろしくお願いいたします。
ああ、高野さん、彼をバシバシこき使ってやってください。彼のところの研究所は入江機関のバックアップをしてくれます。技術的に困ったことがあったらいつでも頼ってやってください。
こき使うだなんてそんな。こちらこそお世話になります。高野と申します。どうかよろしくお願いします。
高野さん、こちらも紹介しましょう。陸自から出向の富武君とおこのぎ君です。陸自側からのバックアップをします。
And Okanogi, whose name I'm sure I'm saying wrong again, that's the leader of the Mountain Dogs.
ぜひご挨拶させてください。
はじめまして、富武と申します。
Like, I wonder if she did end up, kind of falling in love with Tomotake and then, just decided to betray him or just felt like he wasn't as ambitious as her, or if she was using him from the start.
この度のプロジェクトの監査役を仰せつかりました。どうかよろしくお願いいたします。
It's still, I can't, he still looks strange in that outfit. The funding for our research is largely coming from the SDF. It's only natural for the SDF to assign a watchdog to make sure reasonable research is taking place. However, someone in a position like that should be my opponent. Why was someone in that position invited to this private party? Does that mean this auditor is on my side too? Seeing that thorough groundwork, I couldn't help but feel the strength of having a sponsor all over again.
私は直接はひなみ沢に赴きませんが、定期的にお伺いして研究の進捗管理などをさせていただくことになります。
あら、それは残念ですわね。ひなみ沢は空気も良くて自然も素晴らしいところですのよ。ぜひ仕事以外でも気軽に遊びにいらしてくださいね。
ありがとうございます。そうさせていただきます。
If he really is an auditor, I should maintain a good relationship with this man. He'll hold the key to all future adjustments of our funding so long as we continue drawing it for the SDF. So maybe she did. Maybe she just got with him because she figured, if she had emotionally invested in her, maybe he'd just be easier to control.
おこのぎと申します。よろしくお願いいたします。
彼は不正規船部隊の一つ、山犬の隊長です。ひなみ沢に常駐し、三佐を直接サポートします。
ボディーガードみたいなものと思っていいのかしら。
要人護衛、機密保持が主な任務です。三佐の直接の手足となりますので、どうかこき使ってやってください。
よろしくお願いします。
Tomotake seems to be an honest type for a military man, but this Okanoki person looks the complete opposite. His main job is to preserve secrets, but I bet he's also good with espionage tactics like counterintelligence and information control. Yes, that would explain his demeanor. Since the SDF is funding our research on Hinamizawa syndrome, of course this is considered a military operation. Therefore, this research has to be done in secret. That's why a unit like this is necessary. Besides, it's very reassuring to have someone capable of combat working under me. I should maintain a good relationship with him too.
さあさあさあ、挨拶はこれくらいにして、はい、さあさあ、富武君も足を崩して、今日は入江機関の前途を祝して無礼講で参りましょう。
While this is supposed to celebrate the establishment of the Eerie Institute, Eerie himself isn't here. But that is his job after all. Eerie is simply a puppet to fill a seat. Of course, I expect him to help me a little with his expertise, but he's ultimately an outsider. This was supposed to be a gathering where I would show my appreciation to those who helped me establish the Eerie Institute. But it has turned into them thanking me for all of my efforts. I'm always the one to pour alcohol for others, but today people are pouring alcohol in my glass. The new participants were trying to make me happy, and all the top people talked to me casually. They all praised my hard work and my efforts. My research is now recognized by many institutions, and I'm ready to spread my wings open wide. And all the people who are expecting some returns once the research accomplishes something are trying to curry favor with me. But right now I'm just very grateful, regardless of their motives.
それでは入江機関の設立と高野美代君の今後ますますの発展を祈願して乾杯に移りたいと思います。先生、音頭をお願いいたします。
It's like a dream. I know. This is just the beginning, and I shouldn't be satisfied with this alone. But just for today, I can forget about everything else and enjoy the celebration. I'm not a heavy drinker, but the drinks taste good tonight, and the more I drink, the happier I get. Oh, this is really wonderful. To be called Major by Tomotake and the others is wonderful too. That's the rank my grandfather had during the war. That means I finally caught up with my grandfather. It feels like she's getting that first taste of, power, and she likes it. This is only the beginning. From here on, I intend to reach what my grandfather couldn't. This is the best night of my life. I ended up leaving to fix my makeup. I'm filled with elation. I need to feel fresh air to calm myself down. My heart is about to explode because I'm so happy. The gathering is taking place a little distance away from the main building. The restroom is in the main building, so I need to walk across the hallway. A beautiful and well-maintained Japanese garden is visible from the hallway. It's raining. I usually don't like rain, but I don't mind it at all today. I feel even like the raindrops are congratulating me. The cool air feels pleasant on my hot skin. It took me a moment to notice how unsteady my footsteps had become. Maybe I drank a little too much. It isn't like me to drink more than I can handle. Although this is a party, I don't want to embarrass myself, so I decide to cool off a little by looking at the beautiful Japanese garden. Why do I have a feeling that Tomotake is going to come out and they're going to have a little bit of flirting here? I found an elegant chair set on a red carpet nearby and sat down on it. Since I was with the associates until now, I was forced to constantly be on guard against embarrassing myself. But now that I was alone, I could let go and truly relax. When I look up to the sky, I realize it's still raining hard, but in the distance, the horizon is a little lighter. Maybe it won't be raining for much longer. Well, that's normal. Rain stops eventually. No matter how cold it is or how hard it's raining, rain stops eventually. I saw a pair of sandals and an umbrella, almost inviting me, so I took them into the garden. The tasteless laughter coming from the party sounds far away. I tilted the umbrella and looked up to the sky. I felt the raindrops hit my face, and gazed up to the sky for a while, forgetting all about my hair getting wet. I thought the rain would cool down my boiling heart, but as my body got cold, I started to feel miserable. My bare feet were all swollen, and the throbbing pain I felt made them seem twice their normal size. The gravel road continued forever. I didn't even know what direction I was hanging in. Oh, she's having a flashback to when she was a kid, or is this her now? I could no longer hear my pursuer. Okay, this is her as a kid. I had probably lost him by running through the woods like mad. My body was covered in scratches. I finally started to feel the pain from that. I felt both cold and hungry. There was no place nearby to take shelter from the rain. I was just on a little path in the woods. My worst fear was that I could end up heading back towards the orphanage, after bolting and losing my sense of direction. I had crushed that man's finger. I didn't think I bit it off, but I was sure it would leave a scar. Taking that into consideration, it was very clear to me what kind of torture awaited me back at the orphanage. Therefore, I'd have to reach the House of Love and Mercy. If only it had been daytime, then I could have easily found the right way to go. However, with this rain, there was nothing I could do. But I couldn't stop. I had to keep walking until I reached something. I wondered if Eriko and the others had escaped safely. I didn't know how many people came after us, but at least one came after me. In other words, it meant they had a better chance. Did they reach the House of Love and Mercy? Were they drying themselves with soft towels? And if they still remembered me, would they save a towel for me too? I felt so cold. I wanted to find shelter and sit down, but there was nothing of the sort. I saw a tree that looked like I could take shelter under it, but the branches and leaves were dripping with water. It was then that I realized the sky was gradually getting darker. Would this day end in rain? There was no street lights where I was. Soon enough, it would be totally dark. Then I wouldn't be able to walk any further. I just wanted to sit down, even if it was raining. But if I did sit down, I probably wouldn't be able to stand up again. So I endured. If I hadn't escaped with Eriko and the others, I wouldn't have had to go through such misery. But compared to what I had to go through at the orphanage, this was nothing. Thinking about that was the only way to make myself move. But when I thought about that, it's true that this freezing cold rain was far better than my life at the orphanage. But that was only when compared to the life at the orphanage. Was it better than the normal lives of normal kids my age? I didn't even need to think about that. When my parents were alive, although we weren't rich, we led a normal life. The gentle smiles and forgivable selfishness. The sound of my mother cooking breakfast in the morning. The sound of a newspaper being folded. Precious memories like that. I didn't need anything else. I had plenty of friends. I had fun at school. I didn't like my teacher, but I liked studying. I had everything I needed. That was enough for me. I never complained. I never did anything bad. So why was this happening to me? It just shows the trajectory of how life can go. If her parents hadn't died, she wouldn't have been taken in by, the doctor. He wouldn't have kind of got her onto this whole thing about the research into parasites, and she wouldn't have had this lifelong goal to be like, I will become a god. Everything went downhill after that train accident. The die of fate kept rolling a 1. The die never showed its good side to me. If the accident was my fault, then I could have accepted it. But it wasn't. I wasn't even there. And of course that, between Rika and her talking about the die rolling, with fate, I waited for my parents at home. I liked going to the mall with them. We always had a meal at the restaurant in the mall. I always told them to let me know if they were going to the mall. But on that day, they went without me while I went to my friend's house to play. My friend wasn't in, so I went back home. I didn't see anyone at home and found a note that said they were going to the mall. I regretted going to my friend's house. I waited at home. They didn't come home. They were still gone by dinner time. I was getting hungry and got angry with my parents for leaving me. I thought they were having dinner at the mall restaurant without me. If I hadn't gone to my friend's house, I would be eating dinner at the restaurant too. I loved the little flags that came with the kids' meals. I was collecting those flags. Yes, I was. I was trying to collect 20 of them, thinking once I collected 20, something wonderful would happen. But I couldn't collect 20 of them. I only needed one more. If I had one more, maybe the accident wouldn't have happened. Very sad memory of a flag from a kid's meal. I kept waiting for my parents to come home from the mall. I was hungry, so I started to eat some dried fish. If I ate too much, my mother would find out, so I was careful not to gorge myself. Then the phone rang. I assumed it was from my parents. I answered the phone in an angry manner, but it wasn't them at all. What happened to the house? We had rented it, so maybe somebody else had already moved in. What happened to my room? What about my desk and all the flags that were in the right middle drawer? If it wasn't my house anymore, then where was I supposed to go? Even if it remained my house, my parents wouldn't be there to welcome me or protect me. Just because I didn't have my parents to protect me, the whole world became so cruel. How could anyone take me away from the house I was used to living in just because my parents were gone? Why didn't they just leave me alone? They asked me many things. They tried to confirm many things. But how could I have understood any of the forms they gave me? I was asked a yes or no question. I had no choice but to answer yes. And before I knew it, I ended up at the orphanage. It was beyond heartless. I didn't do anything wrong. I was just a little girl. I had to sign so many papers. But why this? The warm and gentle world ended suddenly without advance notice. And I was thrown into the cruel and merciless world alone. Was this the real world? Did I have any allies at all? Just because my parents died and I didn't have relatives, the world had become so sad. When is the die going to come up with a 6 instead of a 1 to make up for the continuous series of the latter? Tears were pouring down my cheeks. The salty taste further saddened and irritated me. I couldn't do anything but cry. But no matter how hard I cried or pitied myself, the cold rain wouldn't warm my body or save me. I didn't even know where I was or in what direction I should go. Eriko showed me the map to the House of Love and Mercy when we were planning our escape, but we only learned the shortest routes. I was completely lost. But strangely, after I finished crying, I felt a groundless strength within myself. I once learned that tears wash away particles in the eyes. But there's a different purpose to them, too. Tears also wash away what's in the heart. I clenched my fist and forced my feet to move. I headed in the direction I believed to be correct on the gravel road. So I gotta see, obviously at some point she ended up finding that doctor. I'm just curious about how it happened. The rain was still pouring, and it was getting darker and darker. I roared at the sky amidst the rain. My sadness was turning into anger.
神様のバカ！どうして私がこんな目に遭わなくちゃならないの？私が何をしたの？何もしてない。ただ普通に生活してただけ。そんな私がどうしてこんな目に遭わなくちゃならないの？人生はいいことと悪いことと2つあって、どちらも長続きしないってお父さんが言ってた。ならこれだって長続きしないんだよね。いつまでも私はこんなひどいところに一人ぼっちじゃないんだよね。ねえ、そうなんでしょ？
As I looked up, I felt the raindrops hit my face. There is no God. I knew that in my heart. But such disbelief wouldn't save me. If I believed he was there, I should have been saved. No, I needed him to be there. Was he going to answer me? I heard thunder. Then I realized he was there. He was there and he was listening to me. In his eyes, everyone was supposed to be equal. And he was listening to me.
もう私は十分辛い思いをした。十分すぎるくらいに。これまでがそれに見合うくらいに幸せすぎたなら、この不幸を甘んじて私は受けることもあるかもしれない。でもそんなことなかった。私は普通の生活をしてきたに過ぎない。それが幸せじゃなかったのかと言われたら、確かにそれは幸せだったのかもしれないけど、だからってそれの裏返しがこれではあまりに見合わない。
I heard thunder again. He was listening. I continued.
もし私の運命が神様の何かの間違いだというのなら、もう私を解放して、これで私の不幸を終わりにして、私を今日までの不幸に見合う幸福に導いて。でももしこれが私に与えられた運命で、このまま私に生涯を終えろというのなら、こんな人生いらない。私を殺してよ。その雷で私を打ちつければいい。落雷で殺されてしまうという最後の不運を私に見舞えばいい。さあ試してみなさい。私の人生を無慈悲に奪ったように、その雷で無慈悲に私を打ち据えればいい。
Even baby Takano has good voice acting. But I'm just like, she's so cute and little. And I think they said it before, like Takano would have been a good member if she could have been their age when she was, like with Keiichi and the gang. I think she would have been a good club member. It's just sad the way things work out. I heard thunder again. It was loud enough to make me shiver. Normally, I would just hide in the house and wait until the thunder went away. But on that day, I wasn't afraid.
さあ殺せ。田無美代子はここにいる。私のお父さんとお母さんを奪ったように、私の命もここから奪え。
The heavens replied to my provocation. The heavens took aim at me, a lowly human who dared sling constant, insolent insults at them. That was my wish. I opened my arms. He's God, so he wouldn't miss me. However, I guess even God makes mistakes sometimes. Although he's supposed to be fair, he had been unfair with me.
さあ狙え。殺せ。私を天に連れて行け。だがもし私を殺し損ねたなら、私の運命をひっくり返してみろ。哀れな子。
A flash from heaven. I thought I smelled something burning just before it hit. The sheer force knocked me to the ground. It was a strange experience. It was something that had just happened, but it already felt like it happened many years ago. I had no idea how long I was down for. I smelled something odd. The bad stench woke me up. When I looked, I saw a huge tree behind me had been split open. Its leaves were smoldering. I looked up and saw sparks in the darkness. I couldn't understand what had just happened. I just stood there. The thunderbolt had struck. It didn't strike me. It struck the tree behind me. I didn't get to die. He was telling me to keep walking in the woods in the cold rain. I won my bet with God. I bet my life. I bet my life against the thunder and lightning. It could have killed me instantly, but he missed, so he had to fix my life. I looked up at the sky laughing and bragging that I was still alive. I heard thunder again. It was acknowledging its loss. Come on, God. Save me. I won the bet, so save me from this misery. Oh, she's so cute. Oh, I stood there. I waited for God to do something while the rain poured down on me. But he didn't answer me again. I couldn't hear the thunder anymore. Again, I felt the warm tears pour down my cheeks. What was I thinking? If there was a God in heaven, he wouldn't have let anything like this happen to me. My miserable life was the proof of God's non-existence. The darkness was about to swallow me utterly. Would I have to sleep out here? God must have wanted me to die slowly in this cold rain instead of granting me an instant death by lightning. I wished the sun would go away. I wished the sun would never rise. I wished that as the woods had grown completely dark, my existence would be hidden by that darkness. I wished I could just disappear. Had it been an eternity, or was it just a matter of seconds? I couldn't even tell time in such darkness. It was then that I saw something. It was a light. I noticed it only because the woods were so dark. But was it really there? Had it been there this whole time? I felt like the light was inviting me towards it. It was a fluorescent light. I didn't normally like fluorescent lights because I always thought it looked cold. But I didn't feel coldness from that white light. I made myself believe the light was a guide sent by God. I had to believe, otherwise I wouldn't be saved. The light reflected in a puddle. It wasn't a muddy puddle. It was a puddle on asphalt. I had made it out of the woods and was on a paved road. The light was a street light. Being on a paved road didn't really resolve anything. It was just a country road. It was a road that went through the woods, so there was no houses, no shops, and not even a single car going by. There weren't too many street lights on the road, so it was still very dark. My feet touched the asphalt. It felt so different from the gravel I'd been walking on earlier. It felt almost merciful. My feet had grown used to walking on gravel, but after feeling the softness of asphalt, I never wanted to go back to the former again. I could only choose between heading left or heading right. I was grateful to God for leading me to this asphalt road, but I wished he had given me a little more guidance. Such a little bit of luck couldn't make up for all the unhappiness I'd gone through. And that was when I sensed his guidance. I saw another light in the distance. It was only on the right side. I headed towards it, and when I got there, I understood what it was. I was amazed to find it there. A telephone booth. Who would actually make a call in the middle of nowhere? A telephone booth in the countryside was rather unusual. There were plenty of red public phones all over, but I always thought telephone booths only existed in big cities. It almost looked as though the telephone booth had been put there as punishment for doing something bad. When I thought that, I felt bad for the lonely telephone booth. It reminded me of myself. Even if I went inside the telephone booth, what could I even do in there anyway? I already knew the answer to that question, but no matter what, I just had to get in there. The door squeaked as I opened it. There were a lot of moths and other bugs flittering around the light. I usually hated bugs, but in that moment I felt like they were my friends, sheltering from the rain like me. There was no heater, but it was still very warm inside the booth. It sheltered me from the cold rain. Soon enough I crumpled to the floor. The warmth from the fluorescent light embraced me gently, and I felt like it was telling me it was okay to cry. But I had no more tears left because I cried them all when the lightning struck. Aching scratches covered my body. My calves were in pain too. Everything hurt everywhere, and I didn't want to get up ever again. I wished I could fall asleep, but if I did that, the staff in the orphanage might find me. The windows on the booth were high up, so if I sat down I wouldn't be visible from the outside. But as it was the only shelter in these dark woods, the staff would be sure to check it. That was why I couldn't stay there for long. Telephone booths from back then weren't completely made of glass, so it was possible to hide inside one. My exhausted spirit understood I had to move, but I just couldn't make myself. Maybe I was experiencing some kind of vision. I felt a strange calmness I'd never experienced before. I didn't feel I was myself. It was very strange. I thought that maybe I was killed by that lightning. I'd assumed I was still Miyoko Tanashi, but maybe I wasn't her at all. I seriously considered those things. Then I started to think that the telephone booth had something to do with it. Because God led me there. He couldn't have done so just because it was providing shelter from the rain. There had to be something else. I wonder what it was. Could there be something in this booth that could save me? Maybe that there is... I doubt she has any, money on her, but maybe there's already money in there. I don't know if she could call anyone, but... But what? A telephone booth is used to make a phone call, but I didn't have any money. But then, I noticed something that looked like copper. Yeah, I called it. My heart skipped a beat. The 10-yen coin I saw wasn't there before. Did I just miss it? I didn't think so. It must have just shown up. In other words, this 10 yen coin was guidance from God. He was telling me to make a call with that coin. But who? There was no telephone book. In that case, I could only call a number I knew. Did God want me to do that then? There was only one coin. I could only call one number. And I couldn't talk for that long. I had challenged God earlier, so it was just a matter of course to think God was challenging me in return. I had only one chance, and he wanted me to test my luck with that chance. I left the phone booth and looked up at the sky. Then I yelled in my heart, "You're on, God!" I wondered who I could call. Who? My house? My parents were dead and I had no relatives. Even if I called, nobody would answer. Actually, the phone bill wouldn't have been paid for a long time, so the phone line would already be disconnected. My house was my lost life itself. No, the debris of my life. Calling home would simply be an expression of regret, which ran counter to the positive attitude of one trying to change their life. So surely using the coin to call my house was wrong, which meant I had to cast this 10 yen coin towards my future. Future. My future? What future, anyway? Then I heard a huge thunderclap which cleared my mind. In that clear state of mind, I saw something from the past. It was the last sight of my father. His final moments in the hospital bed. Though suffering from pain, he tried to tell me something very important. Oh, it must be his phone number. It's gotta be the doctor's phone number.
お父さんが死んだら高野先生を頼りなさい。高野ひふみ先生だよ。
Or maybe she'll call, like, what's it called? Like the, I was gonna say help desk. It's not help desk, but like, the directory, and they could maybe give his phone number.
行ってみなさい。
高野ひふみ
そうだ。高野ひふみ先生だよ。高野先生はお父さんの恩師なんだ。きっとお前を助ける。
お父さんお父さんお父さんお父さん
Many doctors came to the room in a hurry. He wanted to tell me something else, but the doctor stopped him from talking so it wasn't audible. It shouldn't have been, but it was to me. I heard it. I heard it, but I didn't want to hear him say it while suffering, so I pretended I didn't hear. He said it while coughing. I heard it. They were numbers. Yes, there we go. I swallowed once. That's right. It was a phone number. He knew nobody would take me in because we had no relatives. He told me to get in touch with him, Dr. Hifumi Takano. Oh, MIYO, if you'd only remember that number before, you could have hopefully avoided all that stuff with the orphanage, but I understand. He tried to tell me his phone number. What have I done? He tried so hard using his last chance to tell me the most important thing. The thunder from earlier had made me remember it. The number I couldn't remember even once came out so smoothly. I dialed it in. This really was it. This was the number for my father's teacher, Dr. Takano. But my hand stopped just as I tried to put the coin in. What if I hadn't remembered it correctly? No, there was no need to hesitate. I had to believe in myself. This had to be the correct number. I had to dial it before I forgot it again. I picked up the phone and put the coin in. Beep. I heard the dial tone on the other end. At that point, I decided to kill myself if it didn't work. I could go back into the woods and wait for another lightning bolt. I could lie down and let the rainwater drown me too. I could also fall asleep in the middle of the road and wait for a car to run me over. Jesus, like what horribly dark things for like a little girl to think. It's so sad. I made up my mind and put the coin in. I didn't hesitate any longer. I dialed the number at once, but I had to be careful. If you dial quickly, sometimes you can make mistakes. I was getting irritated and that almost made the phone number go vague in my head. I dialed the last digit and heard some electric sounds on the other end. I hoped I dialed the correct number. I didn't know what to say to Dr. Takano if it did connect. Where was I? What was I supposed to do? What was I supposed to ask him? I didn't know any of these things. Making a call isn't cheap. One 10-yen coin would only buy me short time to talk. The line must have connected then. I heard a ringtone. I only had a short time once someone answered the phone. I thought for a moment I should put the phone down. Then I could at least get the coin back. I could call back after sorting out my thoughts. But then someone answered.
もしもし、高野です。
I felt like I was suffocating. My memory had been correct. I couldn't tell the age of the speaker, but it was a grown man's voice. Anyone who was my father's teacher must have been quite old. Never mind that. I had to hurry and say something. Hurry, hurry.
高野先生ですか？ひふみ先生ですか？
そうですが、どちら様ですか?
He must have been suspicious. I couldn't blame him. A stranger was asking him about his name. Of course he'd get suspicious.
ごめんなさい。私、田無美代子と申します。
田無さん? はい。
私の父に、高野先生に電話しろって言われたんです。父は、田無竹光と言います。
田無。ああ、田無君。ああ。
His voice suddenly changed. Dr. Takano had remembered his old student.
私、娘です。お父さんに電話しろって言われて。
田無君に何かあったんですか?
Oh, not good. I was going to run out of time.
お父さんとお母さんが事故で死んじゃって、それで高野先生に電話しろって言われたんです。
田無君がお亡くなりに? そうですか。二人とも? それは本当にお気の毒です。田無君は私が大学で講師をしていた時、しばらく
She's like, I don't care about the backstory, old man.
何事にも勤勉な良い青年でした。結婚式に呼んでもらった時に
Once again, she's like, don't care, don't care. Obviously, he didn't know I was born, but he remembered my father. That was truly a stroke of luck.
それで、田無君は私に何と?
I didn't know what to say. I was only told to call Dr. Takano. How could I tell him that? My time was running out. I felt more and more anxious by the minute. Phone calls are disconnected without notice, but somehow I sensed it. I only had enough time for one sentence, so I decided to say one sentence filled with all my hopes. The phone call got disconnected. Maybe he only heard part of what I said. I could only hope he was able to sense my despair. I couldn't hear anything from the receiver anymore. But I actually talked to Dr. Takano. I confirmed Dr. Takano existed. He existed and he remembered my father. If he grieved over a student's death, he would come visit my house. And he would find out I was sent to an orphanage. Then he would come get me. That's when tears flowed down my cheeks again. I thought my life was hopeless. I never knew finding even a grain of hope could make me feel so happy and strong, except that means she's got to go back to the orphanage. The voice I heard on the phone was so warm and dependable. My father must have thought about me for a long time in that hospital bed, and came up with a name he could trust his daughter with. Dr. Hifumi Takano. So I could trust Dr. Takano. I had to believe he would find me. But it might take more than just a few days. I'd have to wait patiently. A few days? A month? More? I could only wait patiently. Either way, I couldn't stay in the telephone box. The staff would easily find me there. I went out into the rain again, but this time the rain felt a little warmer than before. I had wished to die by lightning, but after that phone call, I was filled with hope and the will to live. I wanted to live, and that was why I felt pain all over my body. When I still wished to die, I didn't feel anything. I had to wait patiently until Dr. Takano came to pick me up. I had to get to the House of Love and Mercy. That would be the best place to wait for him. I didn't think the orphanage would tell him I escaped to the House of Love and Mercy. But the house wouldn't stop me from calling him. Oh, good point, good point. All I'd have to do was call him again and let him know where I was. But I didn't know where I could find the House of Love and Mercy. I couldn't see any signs anywhere, and I didn't even know what direction the orphanage I escaped from was in. But I couldn't just stop. I had to walk. I had to find shelter. I had to find someone and ask for directions to the House of Love and Mercy. I had to keep going because I finally saw the light at the end of the tunnel. The chills and throbbing pain tormented me, but I couldn't die until I met Takano-sensei. I wished a car would come by. If it was someone who lived in the area, I could ask. But the police wouldn't do me any good. I was sure the orphanage had already called the police about our escape, and they wouldn't be forgiving. The police were sure to send me back to the orphanage. Either way, I wished someone would show up. Otherwise, I'd have to keep walking on the asphalt in the darkness forever. How long did I walk? Still no car. Just as I couldn't help but think that maybe the world perished, leaving only me behind, a car showed up. I sensed the car coming up behind me, so I turned around. I saw their headlights approaching me. I thought for a moment, should I stand in the middle of the street to stop the car? It was so dark. I didn't think the car would notice if I just waved at it. But if I were to stand in the middle of the street, I could get run over. While I thought, the car was getting closer and closer. When I made the phone call, I panicked and didn't know what to say. So with this car, I'd have to think very carefully. If I couldn't think of anything, I should just let the car go. With those thoughts vaguely on my mind, I was incredibly surprised when the car slammed the brakes with a screech and came to a stop. Maybe I wasn't all there after that miraculous experience of lightning striking near me. I had half lost my mind in those dark woods, so I probably wasn't thinking very straight. Because the car had stopped after recognizing me. In other words, the driver knew who I was. Uh-oh. And the only people in the area who would recognize me were... Uh-oh. Suddenly a chill ran through my whole body. Uh-oh. I started to dash away. I heard a voice calling after me. I no longer had the strength to run. My feet were trembling and I couldn't make them cooperate. I realized then I shouldn't have sat down in the telephone booth. That was why I couldn't keep running. I was suddenly grabbed from behind, the collar of my clothes almost choking me. I heard fabric being ripped. Oh no. I fell in a puddle and a staff member got on top of me. This time his finger wasn't in my mouth. All I could do was struggle. As I did so, I remembered all the scary stories Eriko and the others told me. All the torture the child who was caught had to endure. The drowned ducky punishment, the mashed caterpillar punishment, and the splayed piggy punishment. The names of those eerie-sounding punishments came to my mind. I screamed and struggled with all my might, but it was too late. Just when I was hopeful that maybe I was shoved in the back seat of the car. Poor Takano, man. It's like, it once again doesn't excuse what she did later on, but it just seems like she just can't catch a break. Or she did catch a little break. Why couldn't they just let me go? Simple. They didn't want me talking about them to anybody. The staff were yelling and screaming while chasing me, but once we were in the car, they went silent. It was like the Grim Reaper had come to get me. Whether I liked it or not, I had come to terms with the fact my luck had run out. But, I had called Takano-sensei, so I knew he would come to get me. I didn't know when that would be, but I knew it would happen someday. So I wanted to live. I would be saved if I lived. I couldn't even imagine the kind of punishment that was waiting for me. But even so, I said to myself, I have to live. I'd already found the light at the end of the tunnel. All I had to do was endure until I reached it. She's starting to sound like Rika, right? Just has to live. Try to live. The car stopped. We had arrived at the front gate of the orphanage. The two staff members grabbed my shoulders so I wouldn't run. My shoulders were very skinny, so it hurt a lot. I was scared. Scared of what I would have to go through. We went through the door and I was finally sheltered from the rain. In a way, I wasn't sheltered at all, though. It was the middle of the night and long past time to turn all the lights off. The orphanage should have been quiet. But I heard a noise. It was a strange noise. The noise of a shower. The noise of metal objects crashing into each other. The staff's yelling and screaming. A chill went down my spine. What could I possibly write down to fully describe this fear? A staff member knocked on the door of the storage room and the door opened. The moment it did, an angry roar issued from inside. The sight leapt into my eyes. I couldn't completely take in the bizarre scene before me. Two staff members were hitting a mat with bamboo swords while yelling violently. It was a mat used in, the one you use when you do gymnastics. But why was it rolled up like that? The rolled up mat was tied with a string and was standing up in the corner. The staff members kept hitting it. Usually words are said to a person. But why were they yelling at a rolled up mat? The way they were hitting and yelling at it as if they'd gone mad. Oh, they must have caught one of the other girls. But wait, I could sense something sticking out from the top of the rolled up mat. It was... let me see. Whose shoes were those? All of a sudden I froze and couldn't think anymore. One man stood in front of me. The man's pinky finger was wrapped in bandages. Oh, he's probably like, I want her. Like he's got personal grudge. My eyes moved upward from his pinky finger and met with his. The beast's eyes met mine, peering with intent to devour me. I squeaked out a voiceless scream. My voice didn't come out, so it was more like a goldfish opening and closing its mouth. The beast stuck his little finger in front of me and roared. I couldn't tell if it was a word or a meaningless shriek, but I was certain it was something abusive. I was scared. I didn't want to die. I wanted to live. I knew that Dr. Takano would show up and save me. That was why I had to live and submit myself to the fear. I'm sorry. And once again, with the apologizing, right? It seems to happen in every chapter. The hand with the bandages grabbed my hair and dragged me along. All I could do was apologize and beg for forgiveness while hoping the beast had even a tiny bit of mercy in him. I was like a broken, apologizing doll. A mad doll that kept muttering apologies until its key wound down. I was their toy, shedding tears, coughing blood, and apologizing in place of clicking gears. I could see into the shower room while he dragged me along. The door was open and I heard wailing from the inside. Oh, maybe they caught all of them. What I saw was very strange. There was a locker on its side in the shower. What an odd sight. A locker was taking a shower sideways. That must be the drowned ducky. I'd never even imagined anything like it before. The locker was taking a cold shower while 2 staff members hit it with bamboo swords. That explained the metallic noise I heard before. The beast didn't want me to see that. He pulled my hair violently and twisted my neck so I looked in the opposite direction. Then I realized he didn't do that to stop me from watching the shower. He did it to make me look at something else. I saw a window in a courtyard. Usually it was too dark to see anything, but the lights were on and the courtyard was very bright. Then I saw it. Inside the hen house, I saw XXX. What is that? XX? Okay, are those the 3 girls? That hair was Eriko's, yep. But why was she blank? Oh, that was too far blank. That must be like her mind shutting things out of what's going on when it's blanked out like that. Oh, I hate that screeching noise in the background. I hate it. I'm sorry. Sorry. I don't want to die. I know Dr. Takano is coming to save me. I know he's coming. I was taken to the staff bathroom. It stunk of ammonia. I saw an XXX which just didn't fit in a bathroom. Why was this in the bathroom, I thought? He's not planning to blank me with blank, is he? No way. No. What? Tanashi, this is your punishment for breaking the rules, okay? Everyone must follow the rules. If you don't, you get punished. Do you understand? I'm sorry. I'll never do it again. I'll do everything you tell me to do. I promise, I really do. Please spare me. Please spare me from blank. That hurts. No. No! Okay, woo. How long have I been crying? I don't even know how long I've been comforted like this. Aw, my grandfather's hand is on my cheek to comfort me. I'm holding his hand lovingly and pressing my cheek against it.
落ち着いたかな?
おじいちゃん。
My grandfather put his other hand on my head. The warmth of his palms gradually calmed me down. Piles of documents were all around me. It was a mistake to sort through data while lying on a fluffy carpet. I must have fallen asleep and had a terrible dream.
うつ伏せに寝ると胸が苦しくて悪い夢を見やすいんだよ。もうこんな時間だ。美代子は部屋に帰って寝なさい。
全然平気。居眠りしちゃってたから眠気がなくなっちゃった。もうすぐで終わるの。だから終わらせちゃうね。
明日も学校がある。もう寝ないとまた先生にあくびを怒られてしまうよ。
I've been going to bed late recently. Because of that, I yawn a lot at school. My teacher must have written a note to my grandfather.
大丈夫。ちゃんと終わったら寝る。 だから続きをさせて。それにおじいちゃんも私に構ってちゃダメ。早く書斎に戻って論文の続きを書くの。
The day for him to present his findings is approaching. He's been working so hard, devoting himself to his research, but there's unfortunately a limit to what an individual can do. He needs a collaborator in order to go further with his research. He has to explain that his investigation could be the key to solving the mysteries of human behavior and make people understand just how important his work is. But this research is about a very complicated subject, so he couldn't seek assistance from just anyone. Someone will be able to help him one day. Believing that, my grandfather earnestly continued his research. I want to help him more, but all I can do is sort through his data and tidy up his materials. I also assist him around the house so he can concentrate more on his research. He always tells me how helpful I am, but that isn't enough for me. I will study hard, get into a good college, and learn many things, so I can actually be of assistance to his research. I'm a mediocre student right now and I don't particularly like school, but I will do it. I want to help my grandfather. If his heart were to fail and he couldn't continue his research, I wouldn't hesitate to cut open my chest and offer up my heart for him. If he needs lungs, I'll give him my lungs. If any of his organs fail, I'll give him mine. There's nothing strange about those feelings. They're perfectly normal ones. The more you say that, the more I'm like, Oh, are we going to go into the backstory of him actually finding her? That's what I want to see. For if he had found me even a day later, I might not have been alive. Or even if I lived, it would be either without my body intact, or with my mind lost to me. In other words, I'm alive because my grandfather came to save me. I mean, who's to say your mind isn't completely not intact? I mean, let's look at the last chapter for proof of that. If he hadn't rushed to find me, I wouldn't be here, so I won't hesitate to give up my life for him. Moreover, I'd be more than happy to do that. Even though I want to be with him forever, human lives aren't immortal. Just like how my parents died, it happens, so suddenly, without any warning. I will never heal from my parents' deaths. But now that I have my grandfather, I'm not sad. However, his existence isn't eternal either. He may disappear all of a sudden for any unexpected reason. Just like my parents. That's why I wish to be a part of him. That way, no matter what happens, we will be together forever. I don't want to be alone ever again. I want to be with my grandfather forever. I want to help him forever.
わかった。じゃあ、この資料の整理が終わったらちゃんと寝るんだよ。約束。
約束。
We pinky promised after that. We smiled at each other and my grandfather went back to his study. The dried up tears are making my cheeks itch. I headed to the bathroom to wash my face and brush my teeth. I looked at my face in the mirror. None of my grandfather's features are recognizable on my face. Of course they aren't. We're not related. He must have a family too, but I've never heard about them. He doesn't seem to want to talk about that subject, so I don't ever ask him about it. I don't care if he has real grandchildren or not. Even if I'm not related to him, I'm a granddaughter of Hifumi Takano. I'm not just a granddaughter either. I want to be more than that. I don't want a parent and child relationship, nor a lover's relationship. Nothing like that. I want something more certain that binds our souls, something that not even a tragedy can destroy. I am MIYO Takano, Hifumi Takano's granddaughter. Maybe it should be MIYO instead. That's what my grandfather sometimes calls me. I want to succeed Hifumi's spirit. Since his name counts from 1 to 3, I want us to share that 3 and be the 4th in his line. Today, my name changes. I wrote that new name in the mirror. MIYO Takano. What a wonderful name for the new me.
Taisa殿、ご無沙汰いたしております。
高野くん、だからもう大差はなしだよ。なしなし。暮れに具合を悪くしたと聞いてから心配してたんだよ。
Oh, Koizumi, is that the guy that MIYO saw later, who gave her the funds?
でも元気そうで何より。
My grandfather always told me he doesn't have any friends. He used to tell me everyone died in the war. But that's not true. He has one very close friend. This is him. He's an elderly man my grandfather calls Colonel Koizumi. I don't know exactly where they met, but every time they get together, all they talk about is the military and the war. So I guess that's where they met.
ミオちゃんも大きくなったね。今身長は何センチくらいになったんだい?
Ugh, just creepy to know that later on, like when she met up with him later, he like touched her butt and talked about how pretty she was. Ugh.
この間身体検査があったけど、2センチ伸びました。
そうかそうか。育ち盛りはいいの。いっぱい食べて、いっぱい運動して、いっぱい大きくなるんだよ。
He's like, make sure you get hot. So gross.
いいな、高野くんはこんなに可愛いお孫さんに恵まれて。
Mr. Koizumi knows my grandfather and I aren't related, but he always calls me his granddaughter. That makes me very happy, so I poured a little more black tea in his cup. After I finished serving tea, I left with a bow. I want to stay and listen to them talk, but I guess my grandfather doesn't want me to hear stories of the war, so he always makes me leave. I left before I was told to. But having to leave doesn't mean I need to go to a different room. I just headed to the other side of this huge living room instead, and that's where she's probably going to hear the friend being like, I'm sorry, I can't help you with the research, and I can't sponsor you or whatever. Although I'm not right by them, I can still sit on a sofa and listen to their conversation. And if they need something, I can come help them right away. I tried to earn points that way to prove I'm useful. I sat on a sofa away from them and started reading an encyclopedia. While doing that, I tried to listen to their conversation.
それはよかった。教授たちは都合が合えば再来週の日曜日にも早速来たいって言ってくれたよ。本当ですか？ありがとうございます、小泉さん。いや。高野くんが書いたレポートがそれだけ興味深かったことの証左だの。かなり関心を持ってくれてね、ノーベル賞ものの研究になるかもしれないと非常に受けが良かった。
Oh, it's so sad hearing this, knowing that they end up shooting it down and that Hifumi dies not ever really having his research reach that next level.
ノーベル賞だなんてそんな。いや、お言葉だけでも恐縮です。
My grandfather laughed. Since he laughed so cheerfully, something great must have happened. Mr. Koizumi must have shown the society the essay my grandfather was about to announce and gauged their reactions. And supposedly they found it extremely interesting. That means they recognized the value of my grandfather's research. That makes me happy too.
しかし、いつも心配なのは、君自身がひなみ沢症候群に感染してしまってやしないかということだね。
Ooh, let's hope that's not what happened. Let's hope that if he did pass, it was peacefully.
君が自分の首をかきむしるようなことがないよう気をつけてくれよ。ひょっとすると私もすでに感染しているかもしれませんな。でもひなみ沢症候群は普通に生活する分には決して危険な病気ではないのです。村人たちがお社様信仰を作り出し、厳しい戒律で自らを縛った頃はかなり危険な病気だったかもしれない。でも時間とともにそれは薄まり、今ではよっぽどのことがない限り発症することはないようです。あれだけの発症例があったのに？ひなみ沢症候群の発症には特に精神の状態が重要なのです。普通に心穏やかに生活している分には何にも悪さをしない病気なのです。戦争という異常な状況下で精神が追い詰められた時のみ。そうです。なに恐れることなどないのですよ。初期の自覚症状はうつ状態に似た疑心暗鬼。それを自覚したら高野式呼吸法などにより心身のリラックスを図り、かつ9時間以上の睡眠を1週間以上とる。これで発症など未然に防げてしまうのです。実際私の指導下にあったひなみ沢出身兵士は一人も開始しませんでしたぞ。
As he talks, grandfather starts demonstrating the Takano breathing method and a bizarre exercise technique. A According to him, this technique relaxes the body and lets blood and lymphatic fluid flow smoothly. As a result, you relax emotionally too. But the movements involved in the technique are so weird, I had to look away because my grandfather looked so silly. That was the one thing about his research I felt bad about. Oh, grandfather asked me to do this exercise too. I don't want to make him sad, so I do it when instructed.
ならばいいんだがね。研究対象が元で死に至ってる医学者は過去にもたくさんいる。君も気をつけての。
だが、研究に準じた彼らの偉業は死後も揺るがない。研究者としては本懐でしたでしょうな。
Oh, so sad he didn't get to see that happen. Grandfather tells me about Hideo Noguchi often. He was born as the son of a poor farmer, but he studied hard and became a doctor. However, he was mistreated because of his background, so he left Japan. He moved to the United States. There, he made many accomplishments as a researcher. He discovered a vaccine for yellow fever. Grandfather's background is somewhat similar to his, so he often said that of all the researchers, he admired him the most. Hideo Noguchi died in North Africa. While he discovered a vaccine for yellow fever, he heard it wasn't effective on yellow fever in North Africa. He went there to research it, came down with the disease, and died. I wonder if this guy is real. A researcher losing his life for his research. Sometimes that's a test of a researcher's courage. In that sense, grandfather is very brave to visit Hinamizawa himself to gather information. He himself says he may already be infected. Although my grandfather estimates from ancient texts that the Hinamizawa syndrome was only a menace centuries ago, and now it's no different from the usual bacteria that share a symbiosis with humans. Many people become ill with the disease during the war, but that was because they were in an extremely abnormal situation. In today's peaceful environment, it's almost impossible for a person to develop symptoms. He sounds very optimistic, but he never brought me with him to Hinamizawa, so maybe he isn't as optimistic as all that. However, since I live with him, there is a possibility I'm already infected as well. But I'm not worried at all. That's because my grandfather has taught me as long as I maintain myself physically and emotionally, I won't develop any symptoms. I know all about the horrible terminal symptoms of Hinamizawa syndrome, but I'm not overly fearful of them. Grandfather is enjoying his conversation with Mr. Koizumi. That's understandable. Mr. Koizumi told him some people showed great interest in his report. They even want to come over on Sunday, the week after next, to meet and talk to him directly. With the rapid advance of modern medicine, unexplored frontiers are steadily dwindling. Was it possible the Hinamizawa syndrome my grandfather discovered might be a new continent in the field? It'll be decided in 2 weeks. It sounds like there will be more than one person coming. And it also sounds like they're all important people in society. They're all rich and famous, yet they aren't satisfied with just that. They all want to be involved with something that's worth an international award. This is a chance to gain assistance and sponsorship at the same time.
では、再来週。私も様子を見に来ます。ぜひ頑張ってください。
これもすべて小泉さんのおかげです。本当にありがとうございます。
それは無事賛同者を集められてからにしましょう。その折にはぜひ秘蔵のワインを開けて乾杯といきましょうの。
That was the last of their conversation. My grandfather kept his head bowed until Mr. Koizumi was gone. It sounded like he set up this great chance for my grandfather. So I bowed my head just like him.
聞いてたかい？ようやくチャンスが巡ってきたよ。私のレポートに関心を持ってくれる人が現れたのだ。
聞いてたよ。これでおじいちゃんの研究に協力してくれる人やお金を出してくれる人が現れるんだね。
まだそうと決まったわけじゃないさ。
Although he didn't want to admit it, he had a good feeling about it. The research he had conducted all alone was finally about to gain recognition.
再来週の日曜日なの？
忙しくなるぞ。プレゼンテーションで第一印象のすべてが決まる。資料を読みやすく作り直したり、いや、人前できちんと説明できるよう少し練習をした方がいいかもしれない。とにかく手落ちがないようにしっかりやらないとな。
資料の作り直しは大事だね。おじいちゃんの字は読みにくいから少し大きめに書いた方がいいと思う。
とにかく忙しくなるぞ。再来週か。 うかうかしていたらあっという間だ。
そうだね。私もお手伝いするよ。ホルマリンの容器とかのホコリも拭き取らないとね。あと丸まった資料の反りを直さないと。絨毯の下に敷いて一晩も置いたら治るかな。
やらなければならないことは山ほどだな。ミヨ、手伝ってくれるかい？
もちろん。学校休んでお手伝いする。
それはいかん。
We laughed together, thrust our fists into the air, and motivated ourselves to work hard towards the week after next. Their relationship is so cute. It's just the things born of this relationship are not so cute. Since that day, my grandfather spent more time in his study. It's not easy to create a report that you're going to show other people. Copying machines haven't been invented back then, so everything had to be handwritten. He knows it's somewhere, but he just can't remember where he put the data he needs. As for me, I have to make sure I have enough guest cups to serve tea, so I'm counting them. Do I have enough tea leaves? Maybe I should get something to go with tea. My grandfather knows nothing about these things. There's a whole list of chores to do. I need to clean the windows so the room will be bright. What else? The 2 weeks pass quickly while we busy ourselves getting things done. What a wonderful 2 weeks it is. I can finally feel I'm actually doing something to help my grandfather with his research. I hope the day of meeting will be a memorable one for my grandfather. Maybe he got, maybe he was so upset by, not having them, sponsor his research. Maybe he died of a broken heart. I hope that day will be a beautiful and clear one. Just as I wish the day is beautiful. Evening. My grandfather, having dressed formally, paced around his study nervously. Oh, they never showed up? I'm also in a beautiful dress. I've only worn it once before at my piano recital. But I'm not nervous like my grandfather. His silly nervousness actually relaxes me. Are they here yet? Grandfather looked out the window. Oh, then a black car stopped in front of the gate. Back then, a car was a luxury item. I don't think I had even one classmate whose family owned a car. So it only made sense that men coming out of the car looked respectable. Grandfather and I ran out to welcome them.
ようこそおいでくださいました。高野と申します。今日は本当にようこそ。
お召し物をお預かりします。
I greeted them and filled the role we decided ahead of time. Though my being relaxed by my grandfather's silliness ended at that point, both my grandfather and I were stiff with anxiety as we greeted them now that the moment was here.
はじめまして先生。そしてはじめましてお嬢さん。いえ、お孫さんですかな？
孫です。ミヨ、ご挨拶なさい。
はじめまして、高野美代と申します。
賢そうな子ですね。本日は小泉先生の代理で参りました。
He wasn't able to go.
小泉先生は急な用事が入ってしまい、
probably all the more reason that he
出
felt
席をすることができなくなってしまいました。
all the more reason he felt guilty because he said he was going to be there for his friend and then he couldn't.
そのことを大変残念がっておりました。
そうですか。それは残念です。
The person who set up everything isn't here. My grandfather even had his treasured wine ready just as they promised 2 weeks ago.
皆さん、ご紹介いたします。こちらは高野一二三先生です。高野先生はかつて軍部の貿易研究所におられ、伝染病予防分野の第一人者として活躍されておりました。
This part's gonna make me sad because I know how it's gonna end. He made many advances in developing synthetic food and synthetic alcohol as measures against malnutrition and ration shortages.
よろしく。
はじめまして。
お邪魔いたします。
The men are even older than my grandfather. They take off their hats one at a time to greet him. Their beards, expensive-looking canes, and glasses tell me they are very high up in society. Grandfather bows to each one of them.
それでは皆さん、どうぞ書斎へ。誇り臭い場所で大変恐縮です。どうぞこちらへ。ミヨ、皆さんにお茶の準備を。
はい。
I wasn't nervous at all earlier, but now I think I'm the most nervous one. I'm not the one making the presentation, and I'm not the one being evaluated, so it's ridiculous that I'm feeling so nervous. I don't know if I should use that as my excuse. But I was so nervous I knocked over the thermos I'd filled to the brim with hot water and ruined the black tea I'd chosen specifically for this day. Aw, maybe she shows like some regret. She's like, if I hadn't messed up at that, maybe they would have, I don't know. Kids have a way of kind of not just kids, but sometimes people, it's like if they screw up one little thing, even if it's completely inconsequential, they'll be like, if I had just done this one thing right, maybe things would have gone better. I apologized to my grandfather and started to boil water again. I just need enough for the guests. By the time I had cups of tea and cookies ready, grandfather's presentation was at its key part.
血管もしくはリンパ管を破って脊髄へ侵入し、髄液を通って脳内に至るものと思われます。また死後の解剖結果、脳炎を起こしたものを複数件確認しています。類似の症状をもたらすウイルスは過去の事例を紐解いても数種類あり、その中でも代表的なものは
I am very glad I don't have to say that word. Eosinophilic meningitis. I could never be a doctor. Grandfather said, walking between samples in formalin jars and pointing to several as he gave his explanations. There are over 100 I feel like I'm not saying that word right. Formalin? Oh my gosh, whatever. There are over 100 formalin jars in here with parts of brains in them. They were all very dusty, so I've spent a few days cleaning them. I am rather proud to see the sparkling jars all lined up like this.
ただし、これらのウイルスが引き起こす症状は多岐にわたります。
On the other hand, symptoms of Higurashi syndrome are very specific to that disease.
それが喉を自らかきむしる自傷行為だとおっしゃるのですね。
さようです。これについては死亡直前を知る兵士たちの目撃情報から分かっています。この自傷行為はこれまでに知られてきたどのような病状にもありません。ひなみ沢症候群独自のものです。また末期患者にしか見られない行為であることから、これは一部の感染症に見られるのと同じエクソダスであると考えられます。感染者の体内で十分に成長し、幼虫を繁殖させた後、ウイルスは体外へ脱出し、次なる感染者を探すのです。
ではその血液にはウイルスもしくは陽性が満たされているわけであり、貿易の知識のない現地の兵士がそれに触れていたならば、彼らも感染していた可能性があるわけです。にもかかわらず、ひなみ沢出身者以外の兵士に感染例がないことをどうお考えですか？
これについては潜伏期間その他を疑ったのですが、ひなみ沢という地域だけに限定していることから考え、現地の特殊な気候その他があると考えられます。また辞書で詳しく取り上げておりますが、ひなみ沢の古い土着の信仰から考え、
ありえないですよ、高野先生。ウイルスに社会性があるなど聞いたこともない。
いえ、ですからこれこそがひなみ沢症候群の画期的な発見の一つでありまして。
This is where he's starting to lose him. The elderly gentlemen mumbled to each other while pointing at the data. With that, I finally realized things aren't going too well.
高野先生のご考説を賜りながら先の資料を拝見させていただきました。まず申し上げて、脳内に潜伏したウイルスが人間の思想をコントロールするなど全くもってありえないことです。人間の思考は極めて高度な神の芸術ともいえる脳で作られます。また思想というものは人間の思考の中でも非常に上位のものであり、現在の地球上においては人間にのみ許された高度な能力です。それに介在するウイルスがいるなど考えられませんよ。
同感です。思想とはつまり個より全体を優先した考え方とも言えます。つまり社会性を維持する最前提条件なわけですな。それが遺伝子を残すこと以上の欲求を持たないウイルスごときに宿るわけがない。生物学的にも言ってウイルス性の微細な生命体に社会性、新社会性が発見されたことは一度たりともありません。
しかし脳内の生命体が宿主の行動に干渉するケースは非常に多く報告されており。
That's what I was thinking too. I'm like, there's definitely been parasites that have been proven to, maybe not to the extent of the Higurashi syndrome, but yeah.
高野先生は一つ誤解をされていますな。ウイルスが宿主の行動を支配する原理は常に生殖繁殖のためという極めて原始的理念に基づくものだけです。
Like, isn't there a parasite that is common with people who own cats, where it can control humans' behavior somewhat? I say this as owning a cat. I'm like, maybe I'm already infected. I don't know. Even in the example you used before of a rat infected with the Toxoplasma gondii losing its aversion to cats, the altered behavior is simply a means to let the host be eaten by a better host in order to change hosts.
ハリガネムシに寄生されたバッタの受水自殺がいい例ですな。ハリガネムシは十分に成長すると水生となります。その際、宿主であるバッタを水辺へ誘導して溺死させ、その体内から水中へ脱出する。
その通りです。私はひなみ沢症候群における自殺的な喉のかきむしりもそれに当たると考えまして。
For example, guinea worms escape the body by having the host scratch the affected area.
そうです。すべてのウイルスの目的は繁殖のため。そんな存在が神の芸術ともいえる脳に潜伏し、いやいや、潜伏すること自体は別におかしいことではない。寄生し、人間の思想に影響を及ぼすなんて、はっきり申し上げて妄言です。いや、危険思想と言ってもいい。
ひなみ沢という村が閉鎖的文化から独自の信仰を生み出したこと自体は日本各地に散見するよくあるケースです。だとしたら日本中のそれらの文化は全てウイルスによるものなのですか？それらは文化的なものであってひなみ沢の件に限ってはウイルスによるもの。その区別をどう立証されたのですか？
いえ、ですから現地で死亡したひなみ沢出身兵士の解剖の結果からそうだと信じるに足る様々な。
失礼だが高野先生、信じるに足る臨床データだと語るには少々先生の収集されたケースは少な。しかもご自身で言われたように戦場という異常な状況下の話です。
ですから次の章で説明しますように、ひなみ沢症候群は疑心暗鬼と緊張、ストレスなどによる微妙なバランスが崩壊した時に、
喉をかきむしるという特徴的かつ異常な自傷行為が複数件あったならば、何かの共通性があるに違いないと疑われるのもユニークかとは思います。ですが、だからこそ当てにならないのですよ。戦地という異常な状況下でたまたまレアなケースが重なっただけのことなんです。高野先生は重なった偶然を見てゲシュタルト的な構成主義にとらわれ、法則性を見つけたように錯覚してしまったのではないかと考えます。
そうでないことを証明するにはひなみ沢症候群の感染者に対する膨大な臨床データが必要です。
That's just what Takano did later.
ですが倫理的に考えてこりゃ立証は不可能でしょう。
出身者がたたりだと了解する行為はどちらかというとそれに対しウイルスによる意識支配を重ねられることは。失礼だが高野先生はユニークなひなみ沢の信仰に浸水し、その結果ご自身が文化依存症候群に取り込まれてしまっているのではないかと考えます。いえ、神秘的分野を研究する人間にはよくあり得ることですよ。我々も日々気をつけています。
The more they talk, the paler my grandfather's face becomes. I was just stunned myself. We've never heard of parasites like that. That's impossible. It was just a coincidence and there isn't enough data. The talk goes on, and every time grandfather says something, they dismiss it like that. Before he knew it, my grandfather could only hold his silence before their criticisms. Oh, poor guy.
どんな発見も最初は理解されないものです。高野先生の研究もそのうちの一つでないかと考えます。当時どんなにバカバカしいと思われていた研究でもその後真実が解き明かされ、評価を改められるというのもこれまたよくある話です。
But he doesn't get to be alive to see it.
私は皆さんに比べれば
Don't put the
素
sad
人で
music
す。
on.
個人の研究家に過ぎず、一流大の出でもなければ学閥にも属していません。
He was so, like, He was so confident in himself, and now he just broken.
もちろん権威や研究所へのコネクションもありません。故に個人の研究ではこの程度のことまでしか調べられないのです。果たしてひなみ沢症候群が真実なのか。
I can understand why Koizumi feels guilty, because maybe he thought that, you know, if I was there, would it have gone any different? Probably not, but I can understand why he feels guilty.
それとも皆さんがおっしゃられるように私の妄想に過ぎないのか。それを確かめるためにお力添えをいただくことはできませんでしょうか。
もちろんこれが世紀の大発見になるならば一大センセーションを巻き起こすでしょう。
But like they said, like Koizumi said, they thought it was more serious than they let on. The fact that they kept all that stuff hidden away, right? And it wasn't until after they died that Koizumi was like, okay, now we can begin research on it, because they actually thought it was pretty dangerous.
何しろ人間の文化や思想はすべてナノ単位の脳内生命体の意志によるもので、前頭葉は彼らを住まわせるだけの場所に過ぎないという。
ひなみ沢症候群が存在し、その感染者が感染によってそのお社様信仰というものに組み込まれることがもし立証できたなら、地球上に存在する全ての宗教、いや文化国境さえもウイルスで説明できるかもしれないんですからな。
その話の壮大さはとてもユニークです。高野先生は我々のような人間にひっそりと論文を読ませるより、それで本を書かれて一般大衆に発表された方がよろしいでしょうな。
Grandfather looks at the ground, his fist trembling a little. But their words were far too cruel. I don't know anything about academics. I'm just a little girl. I don't know exactly what they're talking about, but Grandfather worked so hard by himself until today. Oh, let's hope she doesn't, like, just yell at them. But to prove his research and delve further into it, he needs sponsors. Yet those sponsors are casting him away, calling his research a delusion. That's outrageous. Like asking which came first, the chicken or the egg. Besides, if his research was at the level those cheeky men want to see, he wouldn't need their help. But they're saying they can't help him unless they seek results that are beyond the level of private research. There's the catch, right? So it's like he needs more substantial research in order to, you know, get their help. But if he had that kind of research, he wouldn't need their help in the first place. In any field, doesn't research always start out with just a little idea? If you can prove its existence beforehand, then what's the point of researching it to begin with? If a wild idea can't be the subject of research, how did we gain any knowledge at all? But never mind that. When Mr. Koizumi came 2 weeks ago, didn't he say they were really interested in his research? What's going on? This is the complete opposite of what he said. Aww.
はい、非常に興味深い研究だと思っております。脳はまだまだ未知の領域です。
この高野氏の論文は非常にユニークです。特に優生学的見地からは無視できないものが感じられます。
人は神の子などでは断じてない。人も進化の洗礼を受けた動物に過ぎません。
I'm like, are these the bureaucrats? Are these the same ones that visited Takano? Or are these the ones in present time who were talking to Takano about sponsoring the research?
ならばダーウィンに従い、各地の環境に応じて進化には差が出てくる。つまり、人類にはすでに優劣があるのです。国家としていかに優秀な血統を守り、より良い遺伝子を未来に残せるか。これを国策として掲げ研究せねば、来世紀において人類は致命的な序列を与えられることになるでしょう。
高野氏の研究は単なる感染症の域を超えるだけのポテンシャルを秘めていると言えるでしょうな。
次世代に残すべきでない劣悪な人間が、もし遺伝子によるものでなく感染症によるものであると解明できたなら、外科的手段によって構成が可能だということになる。結果、我が国は未来に素晴らしい人間を残すことができるでしょう。優生学的見地から高野氏の研究は早急に取り組まれるべきです。
これは世紀の大発見になる可能性がありますぞ。もし感染症疾患と個人の資質の因果関係が立証できれば、
If only he knew.
ノーベル賞どころでは済まんでしょうな。
If only he could have known how important it actually was.
小泉先生、この度の貴重な機会に深く感謝。
高野くんは昔から一途で熱心な男での。だが人付き合いが下手くそでな。ずっと一人で研究してきたのだ。
Yeah, there's like, okay, so this must have been back then, but I'm just thinking, I was like, why the turn? Is it just because the research was so important that they didn't want to let him, I don't know.
だが一人でできる限界を迎え、ようやく人に助けを求めることを覚えたんだな。
Maybe they wanted to keep the information to themselves, I guess? Like, learn more from Hifumi and call it crazy, but then, like, secretly they take that information he told them and keep it to themselves and do stuff with it behind the scenes?
どうか先生方、高野くんの話に耳を傾けてやってください。
恐れ多いですよ先生。むしろこの度のご縁にこちらが感謝したいくらいです。
私どもとしてはもう協力させていただくことは前提です。むしろ学会での縄張り調整の方が今後の急務ですな。
このようなユニークな研究を世界に先駆けて研究できるとは。
I was gonna say, this could still be present time, because Koizumi is still alive. So this could be them talking, like, in the present time.
この年になってこのような貴重な幸運に恵まれたのを感謝したいです。
There was a knock on the door. The sliding door opened and the owner peeked in.
失礼いたします。お客様がお見えになっておりますが、お通ししてよろしいでしょうか。
客？はて、どちら様ですかの？
The owner whispered into Koizumi's ear and his face turned pale all of a sudden.
お通ししてください。いや、私もお迎えに上がります。
As Koizumi stood up, two pairs of footsteps reached the door.
先生、このようなところへお越しいただけるとは。
小泉君、ご無沙汰だな。
I'm going back and forth. I'm assuming this was in the past time, and this is why Koizumi couldn't be at the meeting.
今日はちとどうしても君にしておきたい話があってな。
このようなところへお越しいただけるとは。はい。体温ある先生の話とあっては聞かぬわけには参りません。何でもおっしゃってください。
The old man known as Koizumi was not someone whose status could be taken lightly. Although he had retired, he was still powerful enough to wield great influence as a fixer. So from his meek attitude, it was easy to figure out what kind of person this man must be. The old man held onto his bodyguard's shoulder as he walked. He had an expensive-looking cane in his other hand. He couldn't even walk on his own because of his old age, but his intense, commanding presence hadn't declined one bit.
単刀直入に言う。君の友人の研究な。
No.
あれ、やめさせなさい。
は？と申しますと。
小泉君、ひなみ沢症候群は墓場まで持ってかなきゃならん。あれに手をつけちゃならねえんだ。あれを調べるとな、藪をつついて蛇を出すかもしれん。しかも太くてでかい蛇をな。君がこのままガブリとやられるのを黙って見とるには忍びないのでな。ちょいと君の小耳に入れてやろうと思って今日は来たんだ。それの先生方にはお待ちいただいて。どうだ、ちょいと向こうの部屋でわしと飲まんか。
はい、お供させていただきます。
Koizumi realized he was being pressured. He didn't know which direction it was coming from, but clearly some authorities weren't comfortable with the research on Hinamizawa syndrome and were trying to stop him from supporting it. That explains the 180 that they did on...
分かっているかね？この研究はパンドラの箱だということ。
And I feel dumb because Koizumi literally did say this in the first episode and I just kind of like forgot the details about it.
全くのよまいごとですな。本日私どもがお邪魔したのは資料になかったそれ以上の客観的何かが開示されるかもしれないことを期待したからです。
I guess they're really trying to like just break him so that he doesn't even bother trying anymore.
本来ならば本日お邪魔するにも値しない内容だったのを小泉先生たっての願いということで義理を尽くさせていただいたまでです。
徒労ではありましたが来て正解でした。あなたに適切なアドバイスをすることができるのですから。 あなたは余生をこんなことに費やされるくらいならいいですぞ。
同感です。こんな書斎にホルマリンの瓶を並べていても不健康なだけです。
しかし実にユニークな内容でした。あなたさえよければ出版社の社長を紹介しますよ。大衆にはこのくらいの刺激があった方がウケるでしょうからな。
They aren't even trying to hide their hostility. They're laughing at my grandfather, denouncing him, and saying things to denigrate not only his research but his personality as well. If they are simply trying to provoke him, any response would be just giving them what they want. Even in this very moment, grandfather tried to remain a noble researcher and a proud human being. He's no longer trembling. On the contrary, he apologized to them for taking up their time, and told them he had no intention of keeping them any longer.
この論文はお返ししますよ。もっとも、これを論文と呼んでいいなら、学会もどれだけ気楽なことか。
Once again, I understand why they're being so hostile and like mean is because they really just they want to discourage him from continuing, but man, it's breaking my heart. Nothing makes me sadder than sad old people. One of the elderly gentlemen tossed it back to him. Grandfather couldn't catch it in time. The article he worked so hard on fell onto the floor, and the papers scattered all over the carpet. I'm waiting for Mio to just go nuts on them. The elderly gentleman left the study without even apologizing for it. Everyone else followed suit. As they left, they trod all over my grandfather's article. It looked like grandfather's expression didn't change, but I could see it warping. I could see the wall of research grandfather bore crushing and warping sadly. Oh my god, so sad. I jumped. I grabbed onto the elderly gentleman's leg. I don't hate him. If I were asked if I hated him or not, the answer would be yes. But that's not the point here. She's gonna yell at them. What I really can't stand is this foot stepping all over my grandfather's article. I just want to move the foot that's standing on his papers. But the foot doesn't move no matter how hard I push or pull, as if it's rooted to the floor. I felt someone grabbing me from behind. It was my grandfather.
孫が失礼をいたしました。さあどうぞこのままで結構ですので、後片付けは私どもの方でしますので。
My screams don't mean a thing to them. This is so sad. They completely ignored my screams. They continued to step on the papers and left the study. Only my grandfather and I remain there now. My grandfather is still grabbing the back of my collar. I don't have any words left to say, only cries. My grandfather is determined not to show any emotion. He doesn't even open his mouth, so I have to cry for him. Just then, my grandfather slapped me in the face. Oh, that startled me. I'm crying for him, so why did he slap me? Then I understand. Grandfather is the one who wants to cry, but he's enduring, so I shouldn't cry either. I wiped my eyes and runny nose, then I silently turned my eyes to the papers on the carpet, just like my grandfather.
ごめんな、ミオ。
I don't understand why he's apologizing. I thought he was going to complain about their rudeness.
もっと私がしっかり研究できていれば、こんなことにはならなかったのに。せっかく今日までミオがあれだけお手伝いをしてくれたのに、それを無駄にしてしまって。ごめんな。
Oh, how courageous he is. Even after that disaster, he's still concerned about me. Could have done without the face slap, though. I don't agree with that. What is it with people slapping kids in the face? I get it, it's another time, but geez. I shook my head and put my hands on the floor. I tried to gather up the papers, but then they began to fall. My tears are overflowing again, blurring the ink on the papers. These are all handwritten by my father. He was so happy that finally there was someone who understood his research. He was so happy. He spent all night writing these, but they stepped on them. They might as well have stepped on my grandfather's very soul.
私の研究がまだまだ足りなかったんだ。もっともっと研究を重ねていたなら、こんなことにはならなかったんだ。ごめんな。
I wish he could understand.
本当にごめんな。おじいちゃんはもっともっと研究を重ねるからな。これくらいのことじゃくじけないからな。
I don't know if he's saying that to me or to himself.
大丈夫。神様は見ておられる。
I understand why this steeled her resolve to want to, like, really make sure that his work was recognized, I guess. His work was recognized. Once again, I don't agree with the methods, but I understand why she is so
自分が評価
passionate.
されることを疑ってはならんのだ。いつか必ずきっと評価されるから。その日まで努力を怠ってはならんのだ。
Grandfather says that all the time, but I know the truth. God only plays with people's fate. He doesn't save anyone out of goodwill. That's why he let this happen to my grandfather, even though he's worked so hard and so humbly until today. That's why he let such a horrible thing happen to me when I was still an innocent little girl. Grandfather keeps repeating himself, but I know the truth. God exists. The existence Grandfather believes in is real. But there's no mercy to be found in God. He delivers unreasonable fates and makes us call it a challenge. I can't tell my grandfather that, of course. I ask God once more like I did on the day of the thunderstorm. Why? Why can't you give my grandfather's effort and hard work the recognition it deserves? Grandfather told me he'll gather up the papers, so I should put away the teacups. I nodded silently and put the teacups that hadn't even been touched onto the serving cart. As I pushed it out of the study, Grandfather told me. He told me to close the door after I leave. He's probably going to start crying, and I can't handle that. I always close the door when I leave. He doesn't need to remind me. But that's what he wants, so without saying anything, I closed the door. Then as I walked away from the study, I heard my grandfather sobbing. Tears filled my eyes once more. I don't know why this is the thing that upsets me. Like I said, old people, sad old people, man. Sadness and disappointment. I almost feel angry with myself for not being able to do anything for him. Then I felt a cool breeze on my wet cheeks. The breeze was blowing in from a cracked open window. The curtain was flapping gently in the breeze. I heard the cry of the Higurashi. As I listened to them, I calmed down gradually. If I can ease Grandfather's pain by crying, I'll cry in his place. But that won't help. On the contrary, he started to cry because I did. I'm being useless here. I remember that day. I remember the reason why I'm alive now. If he hadn't come and saved me, I would have spent the last days of my life lying in the corner of the bathroom as a human-shaped piece of meat. Grandfather saved me. He gave me back my rights. The right to walk, the right to stand up, the right to wear clothes, the right to eat, the right to speak, and the right to think. In other words, the right to live as a human being. Grandfather took action right after he got the phone call from me. He found my house, and then he found out which orphanage I was sent to, after struggling through the sloppily filled records of the public office. Then he saved me. Of course, he was working on his research then. He spent his precious research time on saving me, a perfect stranger. I vowed if his heart failed, I'd rip my heart out and give it to him. But of course, his heart is fine. So he doesn't need a heart. He needs something else that's equally important. That's something only I can give him in this whole world. I clenched my fists and held them so tightly that my nails left marks. I now know what I'm supposed to do with this new life as MIYO Takano. I finally know. I know the reason why the new me was born. I know the purpose of MIYO Takano.
それは小さな胸に宿る大きな決意。人の命がもしも地球より重いなら、私の小さな決意は地球よりも重い。
I thought I knew of my grandfather's greatness, but I actually didn't know the half of it. For me to be able to really help him, I have to reach his level. All my lessons lead back to my grandfather. There wasn't a single subject I could ignore. Right now, studying hard is what I can do for him.
教師生活をして長いが、君ほどたゆみなく勉学に勤しんできた生徒は見たことがない。かといって決して勉強のみに視野が狭くなることなく、社交性も身につけ、多くの友人を作った。
勤勉なのは勉強することでしか至れない私の目標があるからです。社交性をおろそかにしないのは孤独な天才が あまりに無力であることを知っているからです。
aka how to manipulate people. That's not enough.
私はまだまだ自分の望む姿に至れていないんです。大学に入るのなんて、そこで何が学べるかなんです。
I'm not even close. I'm not even close to being able to help my grandfather.
先生は君を教え子に持てたことを誇りに思う。私立大でも国立大の医学部でも好きに選びなさい。今の君にとって倍率など何の意味もない。君にとって学ぶに値する学校であるかどうかだけが大事だ。
願いを成就し、望む未来を紡ぐ力、紡がれる糸の気高く強き願いは必ず現実となる。
Do I have what I need to be able to truly understand Hinimazawa syndrome and help grandfather in his research? I don't need compromises or excuses. The heights I seek are lofty and perceptuous. This isn't enough, not even close. My classmates are such idiots, acting as if they're winners in life just because they entered this school. A college is simply a place to learn what I need to know. If the self-proclaimed best school isn't worth my time, I'm not interested.
まさか才女のあなたが伝染病研に来られるとは思いませんでした。あなたほどの方なら引っ張りだこだったでしょうに。てっきりもっと見栄えのいい研究に関心を寄せられると思っていました。
私が学びたいこと、研究したいことが、で、私は今日ここで学べる資格を得るために勉学に勤しんできました。
そんなことはありませんよ。入学試験を第1位で突破したあなたを拒むはずもありません。ようこそ伝染病研へ。嫌われがちな学問でね。研究者はまだまだ少ない。だから他の学問に比べて未知の分野が多いのです。
That's quite true. The study of parasites is a mysterious world. Or rather, it's an ignorant one. An ignorant world where the preconception that parasites can't possibly control human pervades. And those ignorant people laughed at grandfather and stepped all over his article.
伝染病の世界にはまだまだ解き明かされていない未知があります。
You talk about like with serial killers or murders, there's like a pinpoint moment. That moment right there with that guy stepping on those articles, that was her moment where she's like, I'm gonna fucking show everybody, and eventually I'm gonna kill a lot of people to show them grandfather was right.
私はそれを解くために、それを解こうとする人の力になるためにここまでやってきたのです。実現の約束された願いはもはや願いとは呼ばない。それはつまりもはや運命。私が紡ぐのは
Yep, just like there's the, you know, between Rika and Keiichi and Takano, weaving fate.
人を世界を支配する絶対の力。
And there's the infamous book. Learning isn't enough for me. I have to be able to research with my grandfather. And so I don't ignore the means to gain the help my grandfather couldn't get. Grandfather's research isn't complete just when it's finished being written on a desk. I need the help of plenty of people to present it to the world, so his great work will be praised by many.
そうです。当会は大学院の首席卒業生のみに入会資格を与えている同窓会組織です。毎年7人の入会者のみしか認めておりませんので、一般的な同窓会組織と比べると小規模ですが、その結束は比べようがありません。
そのような会へお誘いいただき、とても光栄です。私ごときでよろしければ、ぜひ末席を賜れればと思います。
いえいえ、あなたほどの実績と経歴をお持ちの方を末席など、先輩方もあなたを歓迎されるでしょう。会の名簿には現役大臣、高級官僚、大企業の社長や顧問などが名を連ねています。彼らはあなたを必要とし、あなたが必要とする協力を与えるでしょう。
On one hand, I'm so proud of her for achieving her dream and like, you know, really working hard, but knowing what it's going to culminate to. And I think a part of me is going to be a little sad at the end. If Keiichi and everybody manages to stop her, she's going to be like, I couldn't do what I told my grandfather I was going to do.
小泉先生もこの会におられたのですね。私の祖父の親友だった方です。まさかここでまたご縁があるとは。
そうでしたか。きっと小泉先生もあなたの入会を歓迎されることでしょ
An isolated genius is a useless one. People live in society. Society is made up of connections between people. Nobody can ignore that. I do my best as an individual. But to gain the power that can't be achieved as a mere individual, I have to rely on my connections in society. It's all for one purpose. That makes me think, yeah, definitely that relationship that she had with Tomotake, it was just a means to an end. I feel like maybe other than her grandfather, she can't really make, like, actual human connections. Everybody's just like a pawn for her to, you know, get something out of. My only wish is MIYO Takano. Yes, I can't spare any effort.
私の絶対の意志が絶対の未来を紡ぎ出す。誰にも邪魔できない。誰にも覆せない。サイコロの1なんて認めない。けなげな努力が偶然の事故だけで打ち消されるなんて認めない。すべてのサイコロを6にしてやる。サイコロを神になんか委ねない。運不運になんか委ねない。神に祈るのは自らに努力を尽くさぬ愚か者のすることだ。私は神などに委ねない。
She's like, I'm gonna become my
すべ
own
ての
god.
結果は私が紡ぎ出す。私の強固な意志が神にさえ介在できない絶対の未来を作り出す。それは祖父が教えてくれた神になる方法とは違う。それは生きながらにして神に至る方法。それに気づいた時、私はようやく解放される。それは両親を失った時の悲しい記憶、そして論文を踏みにじられた時に見せた。そう、私は神の域を超えるのだ。神の気まぐれなどに負けない存在に。祖父の研究を認めさせてやる。それは私が望む未来、約束された未来。人々が祖父の論文を奪い合って読み合う。かつてないがしろにされ踏みにじられたその論文をうやうやしく手に取って読むのだ。たとえその日を待たずに祖父に死が訪れたとしても、その程度の運命に私が泣くことなどないのだ。だって祖父はすでに私に教えてくれている。たとえ死んで土中に埋められた身であっても復活できることを。私が祖父の偉業を完成させ、世界中が祖父を称える。その時祖父は復活を遂げ、神となり永遠となる。それは永遠の絆。どんな交通事故でもちぎれない。神がいくらサイコロの1を並べようとも。両親を事故で失った日から私の人生は全てサイコロの1だった。でも私はそれに負けずここまでやってきた。サイコロの目など私は超越する。サイコロの目は私が決める。運命すらも私が決める。くじけぬ絶対の意志で。
Alright guys, so that will do it for this episode. I hope you enjoyed. This game is, man, really good at making me feel sympathy for characters that I think are irredeemable. I actually felt really bad for Takano. She had a shit life, and it's really interesting to see where that drive and her passion and her motivation came from. It was just that whole thing with her grandfather. Oh god, that got me. Like, I literally cried. Like, man, oh man. I still know that I don't want her to succeed in her ultimate plan, but I think a part of me will feel a little bad for her and for her grandfather if Ch.8 and the gang manages to stop her, which is crazy. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this episode, and please stay tuned for the next one. Until next time, bye guys. Special shout out to my top tier patrons: Namara Kito, Sparky, iCognito, Simon Rax, Mad Goldsmith, Harry Gazif, and Asborn Kennedy.